Somehow, the Defender is a 5-year-old car, and 5 years is a long time. Too long, it seems, to leave Land Rover's army of designers and engineers unsupervised. Perhaps inevitably, they've been furiously sketching taller, wider Defenders and messing about with exotic suspension and 600 horsepower V8s. And now, well, all that blue sky doodling has been made real with the Octa, Land Rover's mega Defender. So what exactly is the Octa? Well, on paper at least, it's a pretty unsubtle G-Class rival, and it's effectively the regular Defender set free of the limits that hold that car back. And it's tempting, isn't it, to think of the regular car as not having limits in the first place. After all, Defender's won pretty much every group test we've lobbed it into. But of course it does have limits. It's built down to an almost socially acceptable price. For most UK buyers at least, it's running diesel power, and its suspension is almost normal, certainly compared to the Octas. The Octa has none of those things. The first thing you notice is the price. It is outlandishly expensive at £161,000 for the Edition 1 car or £145,000 for the regular car. What does that money get you? Well, the two big things are interlinked hydraulic suspension, borrowed from the Range Rover Sport SV but recalibrated for Octa. And where most UK Defenders are diesel, here we get oodles of turbocharged V8 petrol power. And it doesn't end there. There's a quicker steering rack, down from 17.5 to 1 to 13.7 to 1, uprated Brembo brakes with a bespoke off-road mode, and longer, stronger wishbones, so the car sits higher and wider, 68mm wider in fact and 28mm taller. So JLR keeps talking about the bandwidth of this thing, the versatility within the chassis and the powertrain, and it's hard not to agree when you come out of a boulder field crawling over stuff you wouldn't walk over at 1, 2, 3 miles an hour and then come out onto the flowing South African tarmac and drive like this. It is a pretty civilised device. We've got the most extreme tyre on, the all-terrain tyre, and there's a bit more road noise. And to be fair, it feels pretty good on the tarmac. It's got a bit more of a nuggety edge to the ride quality, and that sort of surprised me a bit. I thought with the bandwidth in this suspension, they might take advantage and do a super comfy comfort mode, but the engineers are explaining that that's not really Defender. Defender has a bit more of an edge to it, a bit more of a kind of nuggety feel, so they've hung on to that with Octa just because it sets it apart from the other stuff, I guess, and from Range Rover. The body control is pretty impressive, and while you haven't got the outright grip, you always know where you are with it, and there is loads of power. So this twin turbo V8, 626 horsepower, 553 foot-pounds of torque, and it can do it all. You're sort of tickling over the rocks, climbing up and down this really technical stuff on barely any throttle with a really nice, accurate modulation to it. And then you get out here and you can just absolutely haul up these slopes. Does a bit of me wish we had the 5-litre supercharged engine? Yeah, I guess so. I've been driving that quite a bit recently in the 130 Defender, and it is a really, really charming engine. And it probably could have done the performance, or we know it could have done the performance, but unfortunately that engine is not going to be around much longer. It won't survive the next round of European regs, and with the Octa right at the beginning of its life, that just wasn't going to work. It's tempting to get hung up on the bombastic BMW-derived twin-turbo V8 engine under the bonnet, and with 626 horsepower and a 4-second 0 to 62 mile an hour time, this Defender is as quick off the line as a BMW M2. But actually, that's not the Octa's secret weapon. The core Defender has normalish air suspension with adaptive damping and mechanical anti-roll bars, and given what the normal Defender has to do, it works beautifully. But the Octa throws that setup in the bin, replacing it with a hydraulically interlinked semi-active system. That gives it full control over its roll and pitch. What does that mean? Well, it means you get the kind of wheel articulation impossible with conventional roll bars, together with a degree of body control on the road that the standard car would kill for. So more performance off-road and more performance on it. Well, on paper at least. But you don't build a car this wildly talented and come to a landscape this wild to stick to the tarmac. South Africa has it all. Thousands of miles of gravel tracks and sprawling boulder fields. Time to see what the Octa is really made of. So you join me in, well, pretty much the middle of nowhere. We left Cape Town this morning, like 4 or 5 hours ago, and we've just been driving inland north, first on road, obviously motorway, and then up into the hills on a pretty great twisting canyon road. And yeah, we're on the most extreme off-road tyres that Land Rover's ever done as a standard fitment on any of its cars, and given that, it worked pretty well on the road. I think the ride quality's gone a little bit versus the standard Defender, and there's a bit more road noise obviously, and it's hardly those tyres the last word in grip or feel, but yeah, I mean, it works well, and you can feel the body control that is improved over the standard car. But this is where Octa really excels. So we've been bashing down these fast, rocky, and in places sandy trails now for a couple of hours, and it's absolutely in its element. You've got that wheel travel, that sort of unfettered wheel travel that lets the car just keep on moving at speed over the really lumpy, tricky terrain. And it's really just kind of taking it all in its stride. I mean, you've got the standard kind of all-terrain drive mode, so this is in grass, gravel, snow, but you've also got, brilliantly, one button to get you into the far livelier Octa mode. Now, that's a real bonus on all sorts of fronts. Ergonomically, it's genius, because going into the drive modes on a Defender is actually quite fiddly. You've got to hit the button between the climate control knobs and then choose the one you want, either by twisting it or selecting it on the touchscreen. Whereas with the Octa button, you just hit that button and you're good to go. And it lets you do that kind of Baja type stuff of just flying over the kind of terrain that you'd normally be picking your way over. It doesn't soak the stuff up to the point where you're isolated from it. I think that's kind of the approach of the regular Defender. Is even on the off-road stuff, it's kind of smothering everything, and it can feel a little bit remote as a result, but with Octa there's just a much greater sense of connection to what the tyres are doing, which is obviously pretty handy when you're threading it through tight corners between rocks on this really loose surface. It's quite punchy, the Octa mode, as well. It gives you a bit more of a rear bias on the four-wheel drive, and it's quite a hair trigger throttle response when you've got it dialed up, but that is all a part of the fun. Really, the game changer, though, is that steering rack. Well, it pretty much transforms the car, and you kind of wonder why it's not like that on the base machine. It just makes it so much more agile, feels so much smaller than it actually is, and it means all those little inputs and corrections you're making, it's just kind of little nudges of the wheel to set the car up for a corner and drive it through. And while I think, certainly on first impressions, the ride on the road might have suffered a bit for going Octa, you have got a much better sense of connection, I think, in terms of what you're doing. The standard car really likes to isolate you from the terrain you're driving over, whereas Octa, while taking the rough edges off the wheel movements, you can feel everything, and it really gives you the confidence to kind of thread it into faster gravel-covered corners and just trust in the car, trust in the front end, and then the grip that you've got through the four-wheel drive on the way out. Wow, so a couple of miles there on really fast off-road tracks, and this thing is just a beast. So the wheels are flying up and down, but from behind the wheel you wouldn't know it, and you're cruising along at speeds that get you a speeding ticket in the UK without a ruffle. But we've come here to Lambert's Bay Dunes to get into the sand, and that will really put this thing through its paces. So here we are in the sand dunes. This is the stuff we came for. The sea's just over there, but this is just a wall of sand in every direction you look. So obviously sorted the car out a little bit. We're on the same tyres as we've been on the whole time, so for the road and the off-road. Just dropped the pressures down to about 20 psi and put the terrain response into sand mode, which does a few things to help you out, but most of all it backs off that ESC and that traction control to give you what you need. Or the steepest descent. It's going to feel like the chin's going to smash itself to bits at the bottom, but thanks to all that ground clearance and those incredible approach and departure angles, it doesn't. And the car is absolutely loving it, to be fair. The ground clearance is really impressive, and that V8 engine, it's just got everything you need. It's so delicate when you would just want to tiptoe around on these inclines, but when you need a bit of go to drag you out of the deep stuff, it's got it. And it's just so much fun, just letting it do its thing and vaguely pointing it in the right direction. And again, that sharper steering is really coming into its own. You're making pretty small inputs and the car just responds exactly as you want it to. And the gearbox just really deftly keeping you in the sweet spot. Whee! Nearly got stuck there, but that's part of the fun, isn't it? Bit of a climb. Yeah, just awesome. Could a standard Defender, a core Defender do it? Of course it could, but could you be having this much fun as you did it? Probably not.
And fun really is at the core of the Octa's character. Outrageously capable off-road, particularly at speed, and keener on the tarmac too than the core Defender. This is an impressively versatile machine. It is a blast to drive too. Fast, charismatic, and incredibly playful for a 2.5-ton SUV. Has the Defender lost anything in translation? Of course. The Octa is a niche proposition, certainly on the performance off-road tyres. Sometimes the 911 Carrera is preferable to the hyperactive GT3, and so the regular Defender, rather than the Octa, will be all the car you need 95% of the time. But like a 911 GT3, the Octa is a bit special. Begin to really put it through its paces on-road or off it, and far from coming unstuck, it simply gets better and better. Land Rover seems surprised at the Octa's success, with more than 4,500 orders already. But surely it was only ever going to be a smash hit. With 380,000 regular Defenders sold to date and no drop-off in demand 5 years in, it's becoming clear there's nowhere this car can't go, nothing it can't do.